Good afternoon. This is Nicole Yarb, Senior Director of Clinical Programs with the ALS Association. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Expanded Access to Investigational Treatment Options for People Living with ALS. The ALS Association is proud to partner with Biohaven Pharmaceuticals to bring you this webinar. The content of this webinar was developed by Biohaven Pharmaceuticals and is being presented by Dr. Irfan Qureshi, Anne Cropp, PharmD, and Dr. Richard Bedlack. Please note, the ALS Association has no financial stake in any medication discussed today, nor does it endorse any particular treatment. For specific medical advice, we encourage you to contact your clinician. There will be time at the end of today's webinar for questions. Please use the chat box at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen to enter questions. Our speakers will be answering questions relevant to the information presented. If you have questions specific to your care or treatment, please contact your healthcare provider. For general ALS questions unrelated to topics discussed today, you may email the ALS Association at alsinfo@alsa-national.org. It is my pleasure to introduce you to today's speakers. The webinar outline and introduction will be presented by Dr. Irfan Qureshi, Executive Director of Neurology at Biohaven Pharmaceuticals. Next, Anne Cropp, PharmD, is Chief Scientific Officer, Early Access Care, LLC. She will present information about expanded access programs. And lastly, Dr. Richard Bedlack, Director of the Duke ALS Clinic and Professor of Neurology at Duke University School of Medicine, will share his experience with expanded access programs. Dr. Qureshi, I'll turn this over to you now.
Thank you, Nicole. On behalf of Biohaven Pharmaceuticals, I want to thank the ALS Association for hosting this webinar today. And to everyone in the audience, hello. I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join the discussion. I'm here to talk with you about Biohaven's new expanded access program for the ALS community. We are very pleased to offer our investigational drug, BHV-223, which is a sublingual form of riluzole, through expanded access. The objectives of today's webinar are to introduce this expanded access program, or EAP, to provide background information on the investigational drug, BHV-223, and to help physicians understand how to enroll interested participants into the EAP. We're very lucky to have Dr. Rick Bedlack, Director of the Duke ALS Clinic, here today. Rick is a great advocate for his patients and was the first physician to initiate the Biohaven EAP. Rick will be sharing his experience focusing on the process of establishing the EAP, which is relatively simple and straightforward. First, I want to introduce Biohaven because you may not know who we are. We are a clinical stage company based in New Haven, Connecticut, that was founded in 2013. We are clinicians and scientists focused on treating neurological diseases. We have an innovative pipeline of drugs across 3 different platforms. Today, we will be focusing on our glutamate platform, but I will also want to briefly mention the others because we think they're really exciting. The MPO platform is focused on reducing neuroinflammation, and the CGRP platform is a new way to treat migraine. Our glutamate pipeline consists of 3 drugs, BHV-223, our sublingual form of riluzole for people with ALS, troriluzole, a chemical cousin of riluzole that is in late-stage studies for several neurodegenerative and psychiatric disorders, and BHV-5000, which targets the NMDA glutamate receptor. Now, I want to tell you more about BHV223, our sublingual form of Riluzole, which we are offering to the ALS community through expanded access. BHV223 was designed to address the needs of people with ALS. It is an orally disintegrating sublingual tablet that was designed to be placed under the tongue, where it dissolves completely and the active drug is absorbed through the sublingual mucosa. 40 milligrams of BHV223 is designed to deliver the same blood levels as 50 milligrams of standard Riluzole tablets, because the Riluzole in BHV223 is directly absorbed through the sublingual mucosa. In terms of the effect of food, BHV223 enables Riluzole absorption by the vasculature under the tongue rather than through the gastrointestinal tract. And in terms of drug load on the liver, sublingual delivery of Riluzole is designed to bypass the liver. I will briefly tell you about the 3 clinical trials that we have done with BHV223. We conducted a single-dose study in healthy subjects. We wanted to determine whether 40 milligrams of BHV223 sublingual Riluzole is bioequivalent to 50 milligrams of Rilutech tablets. We found that both produced equivalent Riluzole levels in the blood, and that the safety profile was also consistent. We also wanted to evaluate the effect of food, and we found that equivalent Riluzole levels in the blood with and without food. We conducted a second single-dose study in participants with ALS who had dysphagia. We wanted to determine the tolerability of BHV223 in these participants. They reported that BHV223 was easy to use and were satisfied with it. Lastly, we are also conducting a multiple dose study in participants with ALS. The objectives of this study are to assess the safety, tolerability, and pharmacology of multiple doses of BHV223 in subjects with ALS. This study is ongoing. I want to summarize the safety profile of BHV223 from these clinical trials. The adverse event profile of BHV223 was consistent with the known profile of Riluzole oral tablets. Liver function monitoring is required, similar to Riluzole oral tablets. The most common adverse event associated with the use of BHV223 is oral numbness and tingling. These are expected events with Riluzole. The vast majority of these events were mild, and all were transient and spontaneously resolved. The current status of BHV223 is that we are on track to submit a new drug application to the FDA in 2018. This will enable FDA approval of BHV223 in 2019. Biohaven is committed to offering BHV223 through expanded access because we believe we are doing good by providing options to physicians and to people with ALS. The EAP was designed in collaboration with ALS physicians and researchers, as well as people living with ALS. The EAP aims to contribute important learnings to the ALS community. This will be through serial data collection of clinical measures. It will gather additional safety and efficacy outcomes for Riluzole in the sublingually orally dissolving tablet. And it will help us understand how we implement expanded access programs within the ALS community. There have been a lot of questions about investigational treatments and how to access them. This slide summarizes 3 major types of approaches: clinical trials, expanded access programs, and the very new Right to Try program. The features of clinical trials are that these are the most rigorous of the methods to access an investigational medicine. An expanded access program is similarly rigorous in that it requires the support of your physician. The FDA reviews the protocol and has to provide approval. The protocol is reviewed by an institutional review board. There is oversight of patient protection and safety. There are not regulatory endpoints included within expanded access programs. And drug costs may be covered by the sponsoring company. For this expanded access program with BHV223, Biohaven is providing the investigational drug free of charge to patients and institutions. The Right to Try program is very new, and we're still learning about its implementation. It requires physician support. However, it does not require a number of the other FDA, institutional review board, and other potential protections for patients. In addition, the drug costs may or may not be covered by the sponsoring company. We're still learning how these are implemented. So with that, I want to hand over the floor to my colleague, Anne Cropp, who is from Early Access Care, the partner that Biohaven has chosen to execute our expanded access program. Anne has a great deal of experience in implementing expanded access programs across different disease areas, and she's bringing that expertise to Biohaven's expanded access program with the goal of making it easy on physicians and people who want to participate in the expanded access. Anne?
Thank you very much, Dr. Qureshi, and welcome everyone. I'll tell you a little bit about the expanded access program that Biohaven has partnered with Early Access Care for, and thank you very much. The expanded access program, as you can see on the left, has a number just like any protocol would. This number is BHV 0223-401. As Dr. Qureshi mentioned, this is an FDA-approved protocol. Early Access Care is the main point of contact for physicians who want to enroll their patients living with ALS in the expanded access program. Early Access Care will guide physicians through the application process, and we're often on the speed dial because they really find it very simple to interact with us on a daily basis. We're there every step of the way throughout the application process, and this process is simple, and Dr. Bedlack will share his experience in enrolling one of his patients in the expanded access program later in the webinar. The contact information shown at the bottom is also going to be illustrated at the end of the webinar, so you'll see it again. But individuals that would like to have further information can contact us at our phone 203-779-8310 or through the BHV 0223 expanded access at earlyaccesscare.com website. We'll begin the process right away. We review all requests that same day. So your physician or you as a physician will use that contact information to initiate the process. All of the process is online, although we can facilitate everything offline, whatever is simpler for you. And we use the Early Access System, which is an online platform that is specific for this program. The documents for the program are all available at any time, and so that's one of the simpler things, is that all the information is available for the program online. So it's available after hours and 7 days a week. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, early access care will guide physicians through the entire process. And this slide provides you with an overview of the overall process. First, the patient a request is received either through that early access care system portal, or by phone to us, or by email. This initiates the process. Early access care will work with your physician to ensure that the protocol and the expanded access protocol objectives and inclusion criteria are clearly understood, and also review the process. We will prepare the specific documentation for the investigational review board, and also a packet for each physician, along with a informed consent. The next step is the submission to the IRB, or the Investigational Review Board. There is a central IRB, so if your institution is able to use the central IRB, then that's the fastest process. If your institution requires that you use the hospital-specific IRB, then you'll be submitting this expanded access protocol into that IRB for review. And the average review by an IRB is approximately 2 weeks. Once the IRB review approval and the informed consent approval is received by early access care, we'll begin that process of processing the specific patient and shipping the drug to your institution. Importantly, the medications are never shipped to the patient directly. They're always shipped either to the physician office or to the hospital or institution. We take care of all of the logistics, and I do want to, as Dr. Qureshi stated earlier, Biohaven is providing this drug free of charge to patients and institutions. So the logistics are that once we know a patient is coming in, we ship it directly to you and to the institution, and it'll be there ready for the patient visit. The simplicity of reordering, it takes literally 3 minutes to reorder a resupply for the patient's next visit. Thank you. That concludes the overall process, Dr. Qureshi.
Thank you, Anne. I'd like to go ahead and introduce Rick Bedlack, someone who needs no introduction in the ALS community. Rick is our rock star, and he really, I think, is a great advocate for his patients, and that's why we wanted him here today, to provide some perspectives and his experience on the early expanded access program for BHV 223.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Irfan. It's my pleasure to be here. Let me start by answering the obvious question. Since folks can't see me, you may be wondering what I'm wearing. Well, I have a neon pink sweater vest with Donald Ducks on it, skinny black jeans, and motorcycle boots. If you can imagine a cross between Mr. Rogers and Sid Vicious, that's kind of the look I'm going for today. Next slide. I thought I would start by just explaining why I decided to offer this expanded access program to folks at my site. So I've been doing ALS for quite a while now, 18 years, seen more than 2,000 patients, and it's my strong impression that almost everybody with this disease wants to try unapproved treatments. And we've really got 3 ways historically to offer people unapproved treatments. 1 is through clinical trials, 2 is through patient self-experimentation, and the 3rd, which up until this program has mainly been theoretical, is expanded access programs. Each of these options has pros and cons. So as you've already heard from Irfan, clinical trials, they're very regimented. That's the way that we advance science. every time we finish a clinical trial, whether we get a positive or negative result, we move one small step closer to the cure for ALS. But clinical trials are difficult to get into. They often have very restrictive rules about who can be in them. Many times they don't want people who've had ALS too long or have anything attached to them. Clinical trials have a lot of burdens. They have visits, oftentimes many more visits than you'd have to make medically. They oftentimes have a placebo that folks don't want to run the risk of getting. Oftentimes it's a long time in a clinical trial between when you finish and when you might get the results. And many times there's no promise to actually get access to the drug in the clinical trial when it's over. Self-experimentation is probably the most popular way that I see people try unapproved treatments. And the nice thing there is there aren't any rules. Anybody can self-experiment. But the downside is that we don't learn much as a community from individual self-experiments. You may get to try things, but the world rarely finds out exactly what happened to everybody who's trying something. And so early access programs, in my opinion, would offer sort of the ideal compromise for folks who couldn't get into a clinical trial or didn't like the burdens associated with a trial or some of the design features. It would allow them to try something experimental in a very regimented way where we'd collect data and advance the field. But again, up until this program, I'm not aware of any other expanded access program in the 18 years that I've been working in ALS. The second reason I decided to offer this EAP at my site is that I do believe in the drug riluzole. I think it's clearly been shown to prolong survival. The third reason is that I had a patient that was on riluzole but had progressed to the point where they were getting frustrated. They were having difficulty swallowing the tablets, and so they were having to crush them, and since their hands were weak, they had to ask somebody else to crush them and then try to get them into their feeding tube. And it turns out that was a pretty big burden for this particular patient and family. And then the final reason is I wanted to learn something. I had never been able to offer an expanded access program, and I wanted to find out exactly what this looked like from a physician perspective, exactly how long was it going to take, what things would I actually have to do to be able to offer these. So I wanted to tell you the specific steps that I had to go through to get this off the ground. And this may be most interesting to some of the other clinicians that are kind of like me and didn't have much experience with this. So on May 9th of this year, Biohaven notified us at Duke that their expanded access program was open. The very next day, I was able to make contact with Early Access Care that you just heard from, and they were actually able to help me through an educational module to teach me all the things that needed to happen in this expanded access program. I was rapidly able to identify this candidate, this patient who wanted to have a different formulation of riluzole. Early Access Care was incredibly useful in terms of guiding me through the process. One of the things they did is made sure that I knew who at my institution would be there to help me with all the paperwork. And so they pointed me to the Duke Office of Research Contracts that would initiate the confidentiality agreement, and also toward the Duke Office of Regulatory Affairs and Quality, which would help me with an application to the FDA and the Duke IRB. So between May 15th and June 22nd, a lot of paperwork was done, a lot of committee meetings were held, but we eventually on that day got the approval of both the Duke IRB and the FDA to engage in this single patient expanded access program. On June 27th, we were able to conduct a site initiation visit, which was virtual. Nobody had to actually travel anywhere. We did it online, and we enrolled the patient the same day using the Early Access Care website. Within a week, we were actually able to get the drug from expanded access care and get the patient into clinic to begin the baseline screening. Now, one last thing that I wanted to mention, that's that last box in the lower right-hand corner of this slide. This was quite different than the clinical trials that I've participated in, because in this expanded access program, I was acting not only as the site investigator, but also as the study coordinator, as the person who had to enter all the data into the website, and even as the person who had to go and pick up the experimental drug from the pharmacy on my campus and bring it back to the patient. Normally in clinical trials, there's funding to pay people to do all these things, but not in expanded access programs. Next. So you might ask, well, how long did it take? Well, Altogether, the entire Duke team spent about 20 hours getting this off the ground. Me personally, it took about 4 hours. So if you're a clinician out there and you're thinking about launching an expanded access program, these are some numbers that will matter to you. And to me, it's very doable if you have a team and a lot of support like I do at Duke. It's much more difficult if you're on your own. Think about that. I mean, all 20 to 24 hours would be your own effort if you didn't have such a great team. Next slide. So we talked about expanded access programs having less rules than a clinical trial. There are some rules. First of all, to get into this expanded access program, you have to have ALS, but it doesn't matter what your Ellis-Gorial criteria is. It doesn't matter how long you've had it. You should have one of the following. Either you should have been currently treated with oral riluzole or treated in the past, or have never taken it, or you've completed a trial with the BHV0223 product and you didn't withdraw from any of these previous exposures due to adverse events. You should also have a problem with traditional riluzole. Either you're having trouble swallowing it, or you feel like it's a burden, that you're choking, it's difficult to crush, and your clinician who's taking care of you has to deem that it's appropriate, that this is an appropriate product for you. Your liver has to be in good shape, which is true of any form of riluzole. Specifically, we want the total bilirubin to be less than 1.5 times the upper limit of normal, and the AST and ALT to be less than 3 times the upper limit of normal. Next. Things that would exclude you if you took any form of riluzole, including this experimental form in the past and had a bad reaction, and if you're known to have any other severe medical illness, especially a liver disease. Next slide. This is what the protocol looks like. The screening phase, the far left-hand green box, and the baseline visit can be combined, and that's what we did at my site. And so, of course, the first thing on those visits is to obtain informed consent and then to run through those eligibility criteria. Then there's the supply of the medication to the patient and a couple of outcome measures, just the ALS functional rating scale, which many patients and clinicians are already doing, and something called the CNS bulbar function score, which is also very easy. It takes about 5 to 7 minutes to administer. During that visit, we also get some labs, liver functions, CBC, and chemistry. Over the course of the EAP, there are monthly visits for the first 3 months, and those visits consist of continuing to supply the medication, screening the patient for adverse events, going through those outcome measures again, the ALS functional rating scale and the bulbar function scale, and obtaining the labs. And after the first 3 months, it's every 3 months, which is about the frequency that patients come to clinic. So I don't feel like there's a lot of burdens in this program, certainly less than we see with most clinical trials. And again, unlike a clinical trial, everybody that's participating in this will get exposed to the experimental product. There's no placebo here. Next. So what can we possibly learn from this expanded access program? Well, I'm especially interested in these. I'd like to see more of these. And I think this is really important because I think a lot of people are going to look to this EAP and say, is this something that the field should be doing? Is there an interest amongst patients and physicians in these expanded access programs? If this enrolls well and we get some good information, there are likely to be other expanded access programs. If it languishes and nobody signs up to do it at their site, no patients enroll, we probably won't see many more of these. We can also evaluate the burden of these expanded access programs across different institutions and across different individual ALS physicians who might have more or less support than I did. We can better understand how to systematically gather safety and efficacy data in these expanded access programs. And again, I think if this is successful, we'll see more of these. We'll see more companies interested because they're going to see that they can get useful data from something like this. And then lastly, and that is to assess BHV0223, this product. How safe is it? How tolerable is it? Maybe in people who couldn't be in the main clinical trial.
So with that, this is Irfan Qureshi. I'm going to take over to do a little bit of a summary. Thank you, Rick, for sharing your experience. The summary really is to reiterate all of the things that you've heard from Rick. Setting up the program at his institution took 4 to 8 weeks and about 20 to 24 hours amongst the entire team. And so I think as a data point, that's really helpful, I think, for people interested in participating about the level of effort that's required. And we have Anne Cropp's team at Early Access Care, which can guide you through the process. And really, that process is similar to the process that you would undertake for a clinical trial, but it's very streamlined because an expanded access program, as far as a actual protocol and trial go, is extremely simplified. And many institutions, as Rick mentioned, have very specific people and organizational features that are focused on helping expanded access programs run. And so at Duke, you mentioned, Rick, several groups that Anne pointed to you that she had worked with in the past. And last point in terms of summary is that the expanded access program is really a valuable program, I think, for everybody who participates, from the people with ALS, the clinicians, and the entire community, because it really helps us to understand the investigational medicine. And then it also allows us to collect information that we can give back to the community and, as Rick said, drive potentially new innovative EAP programs in the future. So with that, I'm going to go to the last slide, which is just to reiterate the information for early access care, the phone number and the email address, which you can use if you are interested in participating. So we'll leave this up for a few moments, and then we will switch to questions and answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Qureshi. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Dr. Bedlack. That was some really valuable information that we learned today, not only about BHV 0223, the sublingual riluzole, but also about the expanded access program and some of the logistics that are involved. So we certainly are happy to take questions that are relevant to this presentation today. Please type them in the chat box in the lower left hand of your screen. Certainly our speakers would be pleased to answer them. If you have any general questions, again, that are unrelated to what we've talked about today, you can email the ALS Association at alsinfo@alsa-national.org. So we'll give people just a moment. And this webinar is being recorded, so if you have colleagues or friends that were not able to join us today, or if you'd like to review the information again, we will be posting a link to that recorded webinar. So I do have one quick question in terms of the BHV 0223. I believe you mentioned that it avoids metabolizing through the liver, but you do need to still monitor the liver function enzymes. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you. So I'll repeat the question and then answer it. So BHV 223, like Rilutech, does require liver function test monitoring. Is that correct? So that is in fact correct. So, the BHV 223 avoids first pass metabolism through the liver because it is absorbed sublingually. However, it does still achieve blood levels and circulate through the liver that do require liver function test monitoring.
Thank you very much. And I believe that someone else had a similar question there as well, so I think that answers that. All right, we have another question coming in. Does it seem like the time investment for providing expanded access would decrease with repetition, or would the 20-plus hours be required for each patient?
So I can take that one. And again, this is going to be a theoretical answer because this is the first expanded access that I've seen or participated in. But I think we'll be a lot smarter about it next time. Certainly for this expanded access program, it'll be a lot easier to enroll additional patients at my site. But I think even for future expanded access programs, now that I know a little bit more about what's involved, it's going to be a lot easier for me at my site to get these off the ground. And it's really like anything else. I think all the different clinicians out there, we want to be able to provide as many different options for patients. And sometimes, when there's a new option, we kind of wonder exactly how much is involved in getting this off the ground at my site. And the only way we really know is to try it. I think there's going to be some differences between sites in terms of what kind of support team they might have. I feel really blessed to have such a great support team at Duke, and that's part of the reason I was able to get this off the ground. And I think we'll get it off the ground even faster the next time.
Thank you, Dr. Bedlack. It certainly sounds like at a multidisciplinary ALS clinic setting, it probably at the moment is a little bit easier with that staff than if you're a solo neurologist in practice.
Agreed.
We do have another question. If someone could please explain again, and this might be Dr. Qureshi for you, the dosing of the 40 milligrams instead of the standard 50 milligrams of traditional riluzole tablets.
Sure, great question. So BHB 223 has 40 milligrams of riluzole, and that 40 milligrams of riluzole is absorbed through the sublingual mucosa into the circulation. And this is in distinction to a typical riluzole tablet, which is swallowed and absorbed through the gut, and which goes through first-pass metabolism in the liver. And so that's why we have shown in our clinical trial that the 40 milligram dose, which is absorbed sublingually, is bioequivalent to the 50 milligram oral tablet, which is swallowed.
Great. Thank you so much for clarifying that. So we have a question from someone that just wanted to clarify. So my neurologist would have to agree with this program in order for her to enroll in the expanded access program. Is that correct? Because there's work involved on the physician side.
Yeah, so this program would require the support of a physician. Ideally, it would be your own neurologist at your clinic because as you've seen, there are going to be some visits monthly for the first 3 months. And so while theoretically you could go to a different site to get into this program, you have to think about the travel there monthly for the first 3 months and then every 3 months after that for the duration of the use of the product.
Great, thank you very much. So we have another question. Is it correct that the patient is not billed for the physician's time in providing the EAP? So could you clarify that? I know that the drug is being provided free of charge from Biohaven Pharmaceuticals. Would the patient be billed for physician time for patients participating in an expanded access program?
So yeah, that's another great question because this is, again, something new. We certainly don't bill patients for research visits. We do bill patients, for clinical visits, and this is kind of, somewhere in between, more toward the research side of things. But I can tell you that at my site, no, there was no billing. There was no billing for the amount of time that it took to get this off the ground, and there was no billing associated with the times that I saw the patient in the expanded access program. So we treated it as if it was a research visit.
Thank you, Dr. Bedlack. A couple other questions. So how will the data be different than a clinical trial? And will there be open access to this data?
Yeah, thanks. So this is Irfan Qureshi. I'll take that one.
Thank you.
The data for the expanded access program will be collected by the clinician there are some operational differences compared to a clinical trial where there is a formal clinical trial database and there is medical monitoring of that data and cleaning of that data in order to ensure it is, I'll call it, up to regulatory standards. As a part of expanded access, we collect information, but it's not as rigorous as in a clinical trial. The data, however, that we focus on is really, I think, focused along the lines of safety, and it's focused along the lines of the specific outcome measures that Rick mentioned, the ALS-FRS-R and CNS bulbar function scale. And so those data we do plan to collect and to make available and publish that data. And we believe that this will help us to really understand the investigational drug and who specifically might be the best patient population in the future for this medication.
Thank you, Dr. Qureshi. Do we have any other questions? Again, if anybody has any additional questions, please type them in the chat box. And I was wondering if you might be able to restate the information for our physicians and clinicians out there in terms of the expanded access program and how to access that, the call-in information.
Oh, the call-in information? Sure. The best way to get quick access to the information is on the website, and that's BHV0223 expanded access at earlyaccesscare.com. Alternatively, you can just call us at Early Access Care. Our number is 203-779-8310. You can also look up earlyaccesscare.com for our general information, our call-in number.
Thank you, Anne. We have one more question. I don't know if this would be Dr. Qureshi or Dr. Bedlack, and you can decide who'd like to answer. Can we just hit the highlights again of the comparison of an early access program such as this versus Right to Try, what the differences are?
Sure. So in order to get access to a product through expanded access, 4 things have to happen. Patient has to ask their doctor for it. Doctor has to agree to support their request. The 2 of them have to contact the company and see if they'll make the product available. And then finally, the FDA and the IRB have to be notified. Applications have to be completed. There may be some feedback from those applications in terms of, the amount of safety data. There certainly is going to be some oversight as far as how much things can be charged to the patient in expanded access. With Right to Try, the law removes the FDA from the equation. And so you still have to have the first 3 things happen. And it might sound like, that's going to really expedite things. In reality, we don't know. I actually have a feeling it may be a much more difficult pathway to get things through than expanded access was. In my experience looking at expanded access in other fields, the FDA was never really the rate-limiting step. If you look at the data from the FDA, they approved 99% of all the expanded access requests they ever got across all diseases. And, if the physician felt it was urgent, they would approve those requests within 24 hours. The nice thing about having them involved is that there was some oversight. As a physician, you felt like you had an extra set of eyes looking at the protocol to make sure that it was as safe as it could be. And also there was some oversight in terms of what a patient might get charged. With Right to Try, that oversight's been removed. It's really just a decision between the patient and their doctor, and then reaching out to the company. And there's still a lot of questions about what that's going to look like in terms of what a patient might get charged. There may not be any sort of limits on what a person can be charged in a Right to Try program. We're still trying to understand that. And then the last difference is that with expanded access, there's some systematic gathering of data. So the world is going to learn something from expanded access programs like this. And again, when we learn things, we move closer to the cure for ALS. Right to try is more similar to self-experimentation. There really isn't any data being gathered in any systematic way, that's going to be eventually published and move us closer to the cure.
Thank you, Dr. Bedlack. Now we have one more question. If somebody is interested in accessing this particular medication, the BHV-0223, does the patient need to go initially through the physician, or can they contact the early access care directly?
Thanks. So this is an important point. You need to go in hand with your physician and go to early access care together.
Thank you for clarifying. I don't see any other questions coming through at the moment. We'll give it a few more seconds here. Great. So we appreciate everybody's time today for taking time to listen into the webinar today to ask some really excellent questions. And another thank you again to Dr. Qureshi, to Anne Cropp, and to Dr. Richard Bedlack for your time today of doing such a great job of explaining this program, as well as talking about the sublingual riluzole. And again, thank you to the ALS community out there and the professionals that have asked some really great questions. Again, this will be recorded, and I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of the afternoon.
Thank you.